I want to briefly cover some of the key services that we're going to go into in this course. I'm going to start with web apps, and I like that as a starting point for a couple of reasons. The first is that it's going to be a very common entry point into using the Azure environment to support your applications. If you can build web applications, whether it's in the .NET environment with ASP.NET or even other environments, PHP, Python, and a few others, you can actually get those into the Azure environment pretty easily and spin them up and work with them because Azure is really taking care of all of the under the hood stuff for you. The other reason I like starting out with web apps is because web apps represent, to me, something that's very important to understand about the Azure environment, and that is the concept of evolution. Now, web apps came in actually initially as something called websites, and websites were really the second major platform as a service initiative within the Azure environment. We're going to talk about cloud services as well. Right? And what happened though is that they started out as websites, but that was a little bit restrictive. So Microsoft actually started to really enhance them, create an app infrastructure, and actually have different types of apps, not just web apps, but also mobile apps. And now there's API apps and logic apps, and it's actually an infrastructure that continues to evolve and develop and add. And that's one of the key things you need to become familiar with when you're dealing with the Azure environment, is that it's going to evolve. And every time you go into it, maybe not quite every time, but quite often when you go into it, you're going to see new things that maybe they're going to be useful, maybe they're not. Well, let's go back for a moment and talk about the Azure web apps. All right, so web apps are a platform as a service offering. All right, so that means that you're not going to have to do any of the infrastructure. You're not going to have to worry about operating systems. All of that's going to be done for you. That's just going to provide that platform that you're going to then apply or build your application into. All right, and so it makes it very easy to deploy and also to scale up a web application. I think the scale features within web apps and really the scale features within the Azure environment as a whole are very important. So what are some of the features that you have with the web app? First of all, you can create a website instance from a gallery. There are pre-built websites that are available. If you want to create that, you can do that. You can also link resources so that if you are controlling the web app, you want to delete it, you can also delete other resources. Now, this is something we'll actually talk about a bit later on. There are hosting plans, and the way that your web application is billed is based on something called a hosting plan, which also defines the capabilities that are available to the web app itself. Again, we'll get to that. There are different tiers associated with that web app with the hosting plan, anywhere from free, which is exactly what it sounds like, up through shared, basic, standard, and then also into a fairly new premium mode, which we'll talk about a little bit in terms of what that can do. Again, we're going to go into these in depth later. All right, and it's pretty cool because this can be deployed in a number of ways. It can be deployed from your Visual Studio environment. You can create deployment packages and actually even use a remote IIS interface to do it. Or you can actually deploy directly from source control providers. So you could have Visual Studio Team Services, the online version of Visual Studio, version control management, Team Foundation Services is what it used to be. Well, it still is, but the online version's Team Services, or even Git or GitHub or a number of other source control providers that can actually deploy directly into your web application. So again, it's designed to make it very easy for you to take a web-based workload, take it from your on-premise environment, your dev environment, and move it into a production environment within Azure.